Good morning, good people. I am thrilled to gather us together for our third installment in our Lenten lecture series, our Robert C. Stuart Lenten lecture series for 2026, all focused around the topic of belonging. And while I'm looking up here at the camera, this is my weekly opportunity to greet all those who are joining us online, wherever and whenever you're doing so, whether it's live or at another time, whether it's this continent or another continent, and that's not an exaggeration. We know this to be true. We're delighted that you are with us as well. I am thrilled for our guest this morning to be with us. I'm thrilled on a selfish level, as similar to last week, this is an opportunity for me to welcome a classmate and dear friend to our beloved cathedral, Dr. Jeehei Park from our very own Seminary of the Southwest, just down the road in Austin. Jeehei and I were classmates in seminary at Harvard Divinity School many moons ago, and here we are, dean and professor. That's how we greeted each other this morning, which is not what we would have imagined when we first met each other. I'm not going to say how many years ago it was. We'll leave that. But that's the first reason why I'm thrilled that she's here. The second selfish reason that I'm thrilled that she's here is her title for her talk this morning is rooted in one of my favorite musicians of all time and a great theologian, Tina Turner. What's love got to do with it? Love as an ethic of belonging. So our topic that Jeehei has put out for us this morning, love when it comes to belonging can never be a second-hand emotion. St. Paul knew this well as he traveled to build and strengthen communities of faith among the earliest believers of Christ. And today she's here with us to explore the 12th and 13th chapter of Romans, one of Paul's most famous letters, so that we can discover how Christian love takes shape in practice and how it can help us make our church a place of genuine welcome and fellowship. Dr. Jeehei Park is now an assistant professor of the seminary at the Seminary of the Southwest, a recent promotion to tenure, which we are grateful to celebrate with her. She has a Master of Divinity with a concentration in New Testament and early Christianity from Harvard Divinity School, and PhD in Christianity and Antiquity from Fordham University. Prior to coming to our seminary, she taught at General Theological Seminary in New York City. She's the author of All Citizens of Christ, a cosmopolitan reading of unity and diversity in Paul's letters, and several essays on early Christian literature. Dr. Park's work has been recognized with several awards and fellowships, including the Forum for Theological Exploration and the Louisville Institute Postdoctoral Fellowship. She is also an ordained deacon in the United Methodist Church. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jeehei Park to Christ Church Cathedral.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Yes, we're not gonna tell how, when we were in school together. That's quite a long time ago. It's really an honor to be here with you this morning, and thank you so much again for the invitation. When I first saw the list of the speakers in this series, I honestly felt very humbled to be included among them. As your dean introduced, I teach New Testament at Seminary of the Southwest, so I primarily work with the seminarians there. My scholarly interests are not actually just like New Testament. They are a little broader than the New Testament texts themselves. I spent a lot of time studying writings from the first and second centuries of the Common Era, and I'm so interested in the ancient Mediterranean world more generally, so that includes Second Temple Judaism and the Roman Empire. One question about these early Christians has always fascinated me is this: how did these people from very different backgrounds, different cultures, different religious traditions, and different social locations come together and form communities? Or, borrowing the title of your series this Lent, how did they cultivate belonging rather than division? And more specifically, how did this new identity they discovered in Christ shape the way they built communities together? All these questions eventually led me to Paul's letters. I've spent a lot of time reading, teaching, and writing about Paul. My first book focuses on Paul's letters, and I've written essays on Paul. So let me begin by briefly sharing how I tend to think about this guy, Paul. I've heard many struggles with Paul, both inside and outside the classroom. Some of the most powerful conversations I've had been with women students in seminary. And many of them grew up hearing some painful, toxic messages attributed to Paul, that women must be silent, that women must not teach in the church, that women should not have authority. To be honest, I do still struggle with those passages too. And there are moments when I read certain texts from Paul's letters and think, if I'm really honest, I kind of wish that those passages weren't in the Bible. Paul may very well have been a misogynist, like many men of his time. Yet, he had radical moments. Galatians 3:28, where he says, there's neither free nor slave, neither male or female, neither Jew nor Greek. That's one of them. But in the end, Paul was not a revolutionary who dismantled patriarchy or slavery. And so, as many feminist scholars have argued, it's important that we revisit his authority. Paul was not a flawless hero. Paul was not a saint during his lifetime. In fact, while he was still alive, his teachings were very much challenged, and his authority as an apostle was constantly questioned. But we also need to remember something very basic about Paul that we often forget. Paul wrote letters. Every text we have from Paul is a letter. So let me ask you, when do we write letters, or now emails? When do we email? When do we email? Anyone? To communicate, exactly, thank you. When there is a need to communicate, when there is distance, when there is relationship, or to build a relationship. Paul was a flawed person, but one thing that clearly sustained him was his deep, deep love for communities. He wrote those letters to stay connected with people. So I want to invite you today to see Paul not primarily as a systematic theologian, but as a community builder. And from the perspective, some of his words become very relevant to the series on belonging in a divided age. So today, I want to look at two passages from Paul's letter to the Romans with you. Romans is often called Paul's theological masterpiece, and I'm not denying that. Romans is full of profound theology. It has shaped Christian thought for centuries. But at the end of the day, it is still a letter, correct? It still is a letter. Paul wrote it to communicate with believers in Rome. And why did he write that letter? Paul actually tells us in Romans chapter 15. He says he plans to travel to Spain, and he hopes to visit Rome on the way, and presumably receive their support for his mission. And there is just one small complication. Paul did not found the church in Rome. So he needs to introduce himself. He needs to show that he is a legitimate apostle, someone who truly proclaims the good news. That may explain the long list of greetings in chapter 16, including several women. So in some ways, Romans reads almost like, this is how I want to view Romans. Romans reads almost like a self-recommendation letter. Paul touches on almost every major topic in this letter. For example, chapters 1 through 8 talk about the sweeping cosmic significance of the gospel. Chapters 9 through 11 address the complex relationship between Jews and Gentiles. And here there's something interesting happens. When we read Romans only as a theological text, we often overlook the final few chapters. Romans 12 to 15 is usually labeled as parenesis, meaning moral exhortation. And in these chapters, Paul talks about the church as one body, reconciliation between the strong and the weak, and practical instructions for living together. And very often, these chapters are treated as secondary, as if they are simply the application after the real theology in chapters 1 through 11. Some commentaries devote enormous attention to chapters 1 through 11 and then rush through the rest. For example, Karl Barth, who really is one of the biggest names in modern theology, Karl Barth spends a full chapter discussing each of the first 11 chapters and then compresses chapters 12 to 15 into one. And as you can see where I'm going, I want to challenge that. In Romans 12 to 15, Paul is not simply giving us application or addendum. He is showing us what the gospel looks like when it is embodied in community. So, as one commentator puts it, I brought here, this is from Frank Matera. He says, the goal of Romans 12 to 15 is not to lay the foundation for ethics, but to show the intimate relationship between the gospel and everyday life. Now, let's look more closely at Romans chapter 12, verses 9 through 13. And then you might have this handout. We're going to read it together, so give me some moment. This passage comes right after Paul describes the church as one body with many members, an image that may sound familiar from 1 Corinthians chapter 12. So, can I have a volunteer? I know this is a big room, but can anyone volunteer to read this NRSV? Not the Greek text. If you want to, you can read the Greek, but the NRSV. Could you? Yeah, thank you so much. Could you read it, please? Yeah.
Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection, outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal, be ardent in spirit, serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, persevere in prayer, contribute to the needs of the saints, extend hospitality to strangers, and bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them.
Thank you. If you read this passage in Greek, one thing becomes immediately obvious. The sentence structure, I'm sorry to Paul, but the sentence structure here is exactly elegant. If one of my students submitted a paper written like this, I might return it with so many question marks. There are no finite verbs, just participles, one after another. So I think our translators for the NRSV did a way better job. But if you go to verse 9, the first sentence goes, let love be genuine. In fact, in the Greek text, it really it looks more like a statement or a title. So it's like Paul just says, Paul gives like a title like genuine love. That's agape, like hey agape, like so this is genuine love. And what follows is essentially a list describing what this genuine love looks like. In this short passage, Paul uses two words, two nouns built on the Greek root philo or philia as the noun, the two compound words. The first is Philadelphia. So can you look for so I put agape, the first word, bold, and then the next word in bold, that's Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. The first is Philadelphia, like the city name. And I think it really means love among siblings, because philia means love, and adelphoi literally means brother, so sibling. So that's more like love among siblings, sibling love. And the second, so you can see in the on the right column, in verse 13, there's another word that I put in bold. So that's 10 philoxenian. Yeah, that's philoxenia, which we usually translate as hospitality. So if you look at the NRSV on the left column, in verse 13, contribute to the needs of the saints and extend hospitality to strangers. That's how this NRSV translates this word philoxenia. But okay, let's talk about these two words. Philadelphia literally means love among brothers and sisters. It describes some familial love that binds members of household together. In the church context, I think it refers to love among fellow believers. Paul uses this same word in 1 Thessalonians when he tells the church they already know how to love one another as siblings. So we might say Philadelphia is inward-facing love. Again, inward-facing love. This love strengthens the bonds among people who already belong to the community, Then Paul introduces another form of love, philoxenia. So as you can see here, philia, that has xenos. Do we recognize xenos? We use xenos in English. Where? Xenophobia, exactly. So there, what does this xenos mean? Fear, yeah, foreigner, stranger. Thank you. So this philoxenia literally means love of the foreigner or love of the stranger. As you can see, this is the opposite direction. If Philadelphia is love for insiders, philoxenia is love for outsiders. The unknown, the stranger, the foreigner. And unlike Philadelphia, philoxenia does not expect reciprocity. The stranger cannot necessarily repay you. Another thing I find fascinating is the verb Paul uses here. He tells the Romans to pursue. I didn't highlight that verb. So if you go to philoxenia again in the Greek text, the word following philoxenia, the one word, and then the first alphabet looks like a D in English. Yeah, diokontes. So that actually means pursue. So he tells the Romans to pursue hospitality. That is a more literal translation of this verse. He says, not just practice it, not just avoid neglecting it. He says, pursue this love of the stranger. The Greek word dioko carries a sense of intensity here, actively seeking something out. In other words, Paul is not telling the church to wait politely until strangers show up. He is telling them to actively go out and seek opportunities to welcome these strangers. And Paul does something interesting with wordplay here. Right after telling them to pursue hospitality or pursue this love of a stranger, he writes, so that's verse 14, bless those who persecute you. Bless those who persecute you. If you look at the Greek text there, the very last line, the first word on the very last line, that also begins with something like diakontas. That's the same verb. Yeah, this verb has double meanings. It can either mean pursue or persecute. So the audience hearing this letter in Greek would immediately catch that connection. Pursuing love for strangers may actually lead to persecution. Hospitality may lead to hostility. But Paul says, bless them anyway. Love them anyway. Now let us move briefly to Romans 13. Can I have another volunteer to read? Please, thank you.
Owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word, love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Here, Paul summarizes the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. Correct, right? And he concludes with the command to love your neighbor. It sounds very familiar to Jesus' teaching in the gospel. And we also, and then the one that we have in the Gospels, that's what we confess in our prayer, in our confession. Yeah? We have not loved our God with our whole hearts, and we have not loved our neighbors as ourselves. But there is something striking about Paul's version here. Can you notice it? Do you notice? He leaves something out. What's missing there? He does not mention loving God. How dare he? Instead, he focuses entirely on loving our neighbor. He uses language that suggests two directions of love again. So let's take a look at the text one more time. So if you go to the Greek text, so the first word that I put in bold, that's allelon, as you can see on the slide, allelon. And as our NRSV translates it, it means one another. And this allelon is used when you indicate someone who is really one another to you. That means that person is already in your community. You know that person, right? Love one another. That means you know whom to love. You know that person. And the second word, at the end of the second line there, that's in Greek, that's ton heteron. So do you see heteros there? Heteron. And we use that word in English too. Can you think of any words? Heterosexual, yeah. And that means what? Literally, different. Different. So the NRSV has it as, it's very unclear actually in our NRSV translation. Maybe we can find the time to talk about these translations later. But the verse 8, we are still in verse 8, so let's take a look at the NRSV. So the first one, owe no one anything except to love one another. That's allelon. And then for the one who loves another, so the NRSV puts it as another. In fact, that's more precisely, the other, or more literally, the different. So the one who loves someone who is different has fulfilled the law. Paul says that person is also your neighbor. So again, there's no guarantee of reciprocity. The other, or this different person may not return the love. They may not join our community. We can't expect that. So here I find Paul's vision of love radically outward and unconditional. So Paul, with Philadelphia and one another, Ireland, he talks about the love that's more inward-facing. And with Philoxenia and this ton heteron, Paul is talking about the love that's outward. Within the broad context of Romans 12 to 15, Paul is illustrating what the gospel looks like in everyday life. For Paul, these two forms of love are essential for community building. One strengthens the community internally. The other extends the community outward. I like to call this as bifocal love. So that's really, that I coined it. So if you want to use it, please give me some credit. Bifocal love. It's a vision that sees in two directions at once. Paul's love is both inward and outward. It strengthens the bonds among those who already belong while continually making space for new others, those different people, to enter. And a community that practices love for the other is never finished because we always have someone who's different. We always have the other. That's how this Christian community is always ever expanding. I'd like to return to the title of my talk. I had a quick conversation with a lovely lady in the bookstore right before the talk, and she told me I love the title, and then also Dean, the great theologian Tina Turner. So as you know, this comes from a song by great Tina Turner. I did not grow up listening to the song myself, but I have a mentor who absolutely loves it, and it's her karaoke number. This is the chorus. This is how the chorus goes. So she sings, "What's love got to do with it? What's love but a secondhand emotion? And who needs a heart when a heart can be broken?" Tina Turner asks this question many of us feel. Why risk loving at all if it might break our hearts? And today I want to tell you that Romans 12 and 13 remind us that we are called to love in two directions. And one of those directions will almost always be difficult. Loving someone who is different from you, different from us, without knowing whether that love will ever be returned. That is always challenging. So when I spoke with Reverend Varnell, he told me that one of the strongest ministries in this cathedral is the ministry of the greeters. Any greeters here in this room? Or maybe they're already, okay, yeah. Thank you for what you do. And I really hope you know that what you're doing is already embodying this bifocal love. Sometimes people may not greet you back. There could be many reasons for that. We don't blame them, but you greet them no matter what. You greet them anyway with a big smile. That simple act may be the first step toward belonging. So in a moment, I'll open the floor for questions. Then I'd like to close our session so we'll have about 5 to 6 minutes for questions, and then I hope to do a small activity before we leave this room. So, okay, we already have one question there.
Hi, thank you for your talk. It makes me want to be back in college. This is not a question, but I think it's really interesting. Last week in the New York Times Wellness Letter, it was an article about how social scientists have proved that if you just greet people, like in elevators, at the grocery store, if you just have little mini conversations with strangers, that those people are happier.
Wow.
So it fits in with what you were saying.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. As you heard, I moved from New York City. So one thing that really struck me at the beginning of my life in Austin was people were greeting me out of nowhere. And I was like, oh, is there something on my face? And why are you looking at me? And I find it contagious, in fact. So now I do it. I once did it in New York City when I visited my friends, and then those people looked at me like, okay, what's wrong with you? But yeah, thank you for the comment. So yeah, it's contagious, and sometimes it's still hard, but sometimes it may not be that hard. Yep. Any other questions? Yep.
I'd love to hear you talk about the translation and accuracy thereof, and maybe other translations. But I see that there are commas in your Greek text here. Do those appear in the ancient text? That's
a great question. That's a fabulous question. No. All those punctuations were added very later. So that's what we call, in my field, that's what we call textual criticism. So there are scholars who just look at this old manuscripts, and then they want to figure out which one goes where. So we do not have any original text of any book in the Bible. So all we have are only copies, manuscripts, and those manuscripts also do not have verse and chapter numbers. They were also added in the endless, I think chapters were added in the 13th or 14th century. So that's a very later work. So that's why translations can vary. Yep.
Well, thank you. I just asked that because those of us who've been here before heard Dean Reynolds years ago when Jesus was asked, who sinned so that this man was born blind? Mm-hmm. Without the commas, it said no one sinned. He was born blind.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges because, yes, in the Gospels we have this direct quotes from Jesus, but those Gospels were also written endless 4 decades after his death. So actually, and then they didn't really they didn't have Xerox. They didn't have computers back then. So who really knows? But at the same time, as a New Testament scholar, I believe that's a beauty because that means that these texts are open to our interpretations. So I brought this NRSV today because I know that's the translation that the many Episcopal churches usually use. There is one updated version now. That's what we call the NRSV updated edition that came out 2 to 3 years ago. Unfortunately, this translation, especially the one in 13:8, hasn't changed it. I think it's still love. I don't know why, but that updated edition makes more intentional effort to translate certain passages in more inclusive ways. So translation evolves. So, but thank you for your question. Yep. Here.
Fill me in time-wise. When Paul is writing Romans, is Peter still alive as the head of Rome, or who is the head of the Roman Church then?
That's a really good question. That is a church tradition that Peter founded this community in Rome. Unfortunately, we really do not have any like textual or non-textual evidence, and we actually don't know whether Peter even made it to Rome. But that is a church tradition because Peter is widely, especially by the Catholic Church, he is considered to be the first pope of the church. What we know from at least from the book of Acts is Peter was very active in Judea. So if you read the book of Acts, Paul was sent to the Gentiles, like non-Jews, while Peter wanted to go to the Jews to proclaim the gospel. So we know that from that text, we know that he was widely active probably in Jerusalem and in Judea, and like according to Paul, that appears in Galatians, and also in the book of Acts. Peter is considered one of the pillar apostles who are very widely respected and they carried a lot of authority from early on. Like these pillar apostles, one was Peter, another was James, like some of Jesus' relatives, like brothers and disciples. So yeah, we like there's no way to estimate Peter's authority in Rome per se.
One more.
Yep.
I wanted to ask, returning to your point about Romans 13:8, and I apologize, this is like which of your children is your favorite, but is there a translation of the Gospels and the epistles that you think is truest to the original writing?
So again, that's hard because we do not have like even the Greek text that I brought here. If you look at the title, I put NA 28. That means the Nestle-Aland 28th edition. So even the Greek Bible is being edited all the time. So we do not have any original text. I think the NRSV does a really good job. I think I often use the NRSV updated edition in my class too, especially for some comparison. I think it's pretty good too. If you are, this is not for the New Testament, but if you want to take a look at the Old Testament, there is this like Jewish translation of the Old Testament. You'll find, especially if you read some Psalms, you'll find some translations are quite strikingly, notably different. So I think that can be one good reference. For the New Testament, I think the NRSV is always good to go. If you are more interested in, I really want to know more like updated, more recent translation, you can definitely take a look at the NRSV updated edition. Like so, you'll see NRSV, and then UE is added at the end, like NRSV. I usually call it NRSV. But I think as I said, even the Greek Bible is always being updated, and as this gentleman asked, like where does the comma go? Here, there, it can change. So that's always an ongoing discussion among scholars.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Gregory, I think 590 to 604 is a very important person with regard to organizing plain chant and liturgy and that sort of thing. Was there a similar, did he have a similar interest in translating Greek from Greek?
Okay. I think I believe you mean Gregory of Nyssa. The many church fathers translated the Greek New Testament into Latin. Many of them. Augustine did it, Tertullian did it, many of them did it. Doesn't mean that their translations were always accurate. Even I discussed this with my students last semester. I taught an elective on Romans last semester. For example, for Augustine, Romans chapter 5 is is almost like everything when he needs some biblical foundation for his concept of original sin. He translates it, and that is questionable. I'm not going to say it's wrong, but it's okay. It opens up some discussion, but it serves his purpose because he really wants to shed light on this idea of original sin from Paul's letter. So one thing that's very interesting is I think these church fathers, these early church fathers, were not quite interested in looking for this very accurate version of the Bible. I think probably they were already aware that these are just manuscripts. These are manuscripts, and then they made more intentional effort in making meaning out of it. So they read the Bible to build their theology upon it. But they were, I think, translation did happen, but it was I think their interests were quite different from ours because we always want something more accurate. But they were okay, we just accept as they are, and we'll utilize them as they are. Yep.
Oh.
Are you suggesting that they live in a political world? Their translation was to support their union narrative?
Well, I think I'll have to say that I appreciate it, and I think that is your interpretation. I think I wouldn't go that far because, but I see your point absolutely. But this Bible, the Holy Scripture as we have it now, this canon list was not fixed until endless 4th or 5th century. So this category was very open. People had more resources, people had more books. And for example, there's a text from the 2nd century called Shepherd of Hermas. So popular, but it didn't make it to the canon list. For some reason, who knows? But it was so widely popular. So I think they didn't privatize text for their own political purposes, but they were living in a very different world when it comes to scripture. They didn't have the concept of scripture as we have it now. It was before this list was closed and this list got fixed. So I think that's why this early Christian period is so fascinating, because everything was in the making, basically.
They were closer to the original.
Yes, yeah. Yep. Okay, it's 10:54. So one small activity. Here it is. So I'm sure in this room there is at least one person you haven't met yet. Mm-hmm. So before we leave, I'd like to invite you to find that person, or on your way to the Eucharist, say hello and exchange your names. Exchange your names. That's it. Because sometimes belonging begins with something that simple. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Park, for being with us and sharing all of your work with us. I'm going to let that run, but for those who have been in church already, you know that this connects with what we're talking about. If you haven't been in church already, this will be a great primer for what I'm planning to talk about in the pulpit this morning. So be excited for our guests back in the space next Sunday. Dr. Lisa Kimball will be with us from Virginia Theological Seminary. So if you have not yet worshiped this morning, we'll see you in church in just a few moments. If you have, go in peace to love and serve the Lord. So, this is my wife, Shelley.
Oh my goodness, so wonderful to meet you. Hi.